success is frankly measured in this industry. It is measured. And so you have to find a way to like remain in that like holistic mindset while also just being okay with the reality that there are these metric systems set up to define how well you're doing.
Hi, Donna. How are you?
Hi, good. How are you?
I am fantastic. I appreciate you doing this. Thank you so much.
Sure, of course. Thanks for having me. Can you see me?
I can see you. Can you see me?
Okay, I do. I see you. Hi.
Hello. I'm Adam, by the way, and this is about you and your journey in music. And we'll talk about the album. And I love the two songs that you've put out thus far. So I'm excited
Thank
to.
you. Hi, Adam.
Hello. I'm excited to hear your story.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
So you're from what I'm reading online, and it screwed me in the past, but are you from New Jersey?
I am from New Jersey.
Born and raised?
Yeah, I was born in New York, and my parents moved us to the suburbs of New Jersey when I was 2.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, I was raised there with my 5 siblings in a super suburban neighborhood in New Jersey. Yeah.
That's amazing. Where do you fall in line in the siblings?
I'm the second oldest.
Second oldest. Okay.
Yeah. And so my older sister's super type A, like went to college and got on the dean's list and got a great job. And like that's her vibe. And I'm very like second child vibe, but play
Okay.
I play big sister to a lot of my younger siblings.
And isn't your brother in your band? Is that what I saw?
I've played with my brother a lot. Yeah, my brother is 20, I think he's 21 now and still out in New Jersey with my parents because he's still a kid. But yeah, we've
Right.
we've toured together over the years and I tap him for stuff all the time. He's an incredible musician.
That's awesome. And you come from a musical family, correct?
I do, yeah. It's like been in my lineage for a really long time. Like my dad's mother was a songwriter, and would like
Wow.
write little jingles. And yeah, one of my most like prized possessions is her like lyric book from the 40s. It's just like the coolest thing.
That is
Um,
amazing.
right? Just like so interesting to like read someone's musings from such a different time. But yeah, my father was played in bands and wrote songs and was a singer and a producer, and he had a studio in New York, which is where he met my mother. So yeah, music is like it's very like in the blood for sure.
Yeah. So that was his gig. I mean, that was his job. He was a musician.
That was his thing. Yeah. He was a session drummer and he produced for a lot of like up and coming people that went on to do some insane things. But he wanted to have a family with my mother, and he was super passionate about education as well. So he got into educating and was going to school and working as I was growing up. And he did some really cool stuff with like combining like historical literature stuff with music and creating programs for kids to like learn about history, which is what he taught through music, which is like a really cool intersection of someone just taking what they're really passionate about and finding a way to share it. And so yeah, he's super inspiring to me, always has been.
That's awesome. With your grandmother's lyric book, did you know her growing up, or is she still
No,
around? Oh, okay.
no, I didn't get to know her, but my dad says I'm a whole lot like her, which I think is really interesting, how that stuff can carry generationally. But um no, my dad's family was always really small, and he was from such a weird time in history, and like grew up in the 50s, and like just can't imagine how weird that must have been. But he lost both of his parents when he was pretty young. And yeah, such a wealth of like emotional like depth there from him. And yeah, that's rubbed off on me in a really big way.
I
But
bet. I mean,
he says I'm like his mom a lot, which I think is really cool.
that's amazing, especially as a songwriter and a lyricist, and being able
Yeah.
to kind of, you know, take that on as well, like his mom was. It's
It
cool.
makes him super, super proud, which is nice because I was such a shit when I was younger and like I was so rebellious and always getting in trouble. And I think getting into music really like set me on a more like serious course. I just got really serious about it when I was a teenager and was like so passionate about it and wanted it so bad that I think it helps just kind of all the like stupid shit I was doing just sort of became less important to me and kind of fell away. And he's so excited and loves that I make music, even though he knows how difficult it is to like, make a career of it. And I definitely struggle, but I'm happy to be an artist
Yeah, I
with.
mean, to have, usually if your family or parents, sometimes if they're in the industry or to a degree, it's like they don't want their kids to do it, right? It's like, oh, it was such a struggle, it was so hard. Like there's other avenues to kind of make money or whatever, but to be supportive of what you're doing, and proud of it, that's amazing.
Yeah, we had a weird upbringing. It was very like freedom of expression. It was very like supportive of how weird and strange we were as kids and how into like performance and expressing ourselves we were. And I think my parents knew too that there were like ways to have a career that, you know, I think when you think of like pop artists, you have this pretty narrow understanding of like how that person might succeed.
Right.
And I think my parents just had this more in-depth understanding of like you could sell songs for advertisement and you could like there's ways to have a career
Hmm.
that didn't have to do with like making it big. And so I think that helped a lot with them being able to like justify that kind of support for what I was trying to do.
Sure, it's not like the only avenue is I'm gonna be a big
Big star.
star, right? You can write. I just recently moved to Nashville a couple of years ago. I'm from San Diego originally,
Awesome.
and it's like meeting these people that have these huge careers, and you wouldn't have any clue who they were when they're walking into a restaurant or whatever. And it's like, oh, that person's wrote, 10 number one songs. Like what?
Totally. So ideal. Like that would be my dream career is to just like write cool things that you would never know that I wrote. And yeah, very like
Well, you've
very
done that to a degree, right? You've written for other people.
a bit. It's something I'm getting into more now as I've got a few records behind me and I'm independent now, which has been really interesting career shift. And I'm, with a new publishing company now, and I'm really intent on developing artists and being a part of the writing process for other artists to figure out what do I want to say and who do I want to be and how do I want to present my ideas. And I I loved that process of and I still love that process of record making. And so yeah, I'm starting to get into it more and move myself more in that direction just because it's I just think it's like super fascinating and a really fun way to use skills that don't get utilized like all the time in your artistry. Like, you make a record and then you promote the record and that's like 10 songs,
Right.
if you're lucky. And so like I love the idea of being able to create more and be involved, behind the scenes on things. Like that's really inspiring to me. And making records is like my favorite part of the process. So I want to make records for other people. Yeah. But I've dabbled a little bit and I'm starting to get into it more. And this year there will be more songs coming out that I wrote that I'm not on as an artist. And I'm really, really excited about it.
That's really, really cool. So first off, like where obviously coming from a musical household, do you like where do you start out in your kind of journey? Did you start taking piano lessons at an early age? Was it something that your parents were like, "Oh, we want you to at least learn an instrument growing up," or was it you wanting to do it? Like how
No,
did
I
you kind
wish
of
that
fall
I
into it?
got lessons. My parents struggled a lot. There were six of us, and my dad was you know, like raising us on a teacher's salary, and my mom, you know, homeschooled us.
Okay.
So it was a super weird upbringing, like a really strange childhood in that way. And so I think, you know, I mentioned my dad's studio. He had kept so much of his equipment. He kept it in our basement, and he would record us from the time I was really, really young. And so it just like, and I look back now and it's so weird because like we were using like tape machines and like, you know, like this microphone from the 60s, a Neumann U87, that's just this like
Damn. Like,
beautiful, yeah, like a
yeah.
really, and I'm like 4 and I'm like singing on it, I can't pronounce my R's, like like it's silly to think about now and how much time I spend in studios, and I'm really into like microphones and gear
Here.
and
Yeah.
compressors, and so I think it's so cool. So just to know that that's how I kind of was introduced to the concept of like singing on a microphone and singing in a studio. And my earliest memories of that, like I was like 4 when we started doing that. So in terms of like introduction to and like just having access to like making music and being creative, that was just kind of like inherent to my environment, like from as early as I can remember. So we never really like took lessons, but we were home with each other all the time. And so my sisters and I would like harmonize with each other to like, you know, whatever my dad had on, he was always listening to like the Beatles and Aretha Franklin. And so whatever was playing, we would like figure out the harmonies and sing together. And I think that's what made my focus so strongly like vocalization and like being a
Mhm.
vocalist. And I kind of just became obsessed with it. And they got us involved in theater, in local theater, so that we could like not be the weird homeschooled kids that didn't have any friends, but, you know, like have a community of people to hang out with. So I was doing theater when I was young, and that kind of helped with the like stage introduction thing. But yeah, that's kind of how music became like a presence. I think
Mhm.
it just was there and we were really into it. And instead of discouraging it, my parents just encouraged it. Like we were never really like judged or told that it was strange for us to be doing that, or like, oh, you know, like get back to work or whatever. Like it
Yeah.
was always very like, oh, that's so great that you guys are doing that and that you like that. So yeah,
That's
it
awesome.
kind of just happened that way. And I just kind of I just never stopped recording music and singing from, yeah, from that time.
Were you writing as well? Like, I mean, like, was that
Totally.
something you were a part of, like lyrics or poems, or what? When did you start
Totally.
doing that?
Oh my God, I was so like, I was so angsty and so emotional. And so yeah, I would write little songs by like singing to myself in my backyard, and just like about how I felt. And I was really young doing that. And that just kind of developed into like, you know, we'd have like, my dad would always bring stuff home from the schools that they were throwing out. And they were always throwing out like crazy shit. Like he brought home a keyboard that a couple of the keys like didn't work, you know, so like the school didn't want to use it anymore, but we used it. So I was always coming
Yeah.
on
Like, who
like,
gives a shit? Two keys don't work. Whatever.
I don't even know how to play. So that's fine. So yeah, I started writing songs on this little keyboard, and there were always guitars around. And yeah, I just would figure out how to play a couple of chords and be like, that's good enough. And then just like write lyrics. And singing was always the reason for all of it. And like I just wanted to like express myself vocally. So yeah, I've always been writing kind of as a way to sing. And then
Mhm.
I found that eventually the writing caught up to being like just as important to me, like the storytelling and the crafting a song and expressing yourself, you know, and through a lyric. And I love lyricism, and it's just such a huge part of what I do now. But yeah, all kind of through just wanting to sing.
Would you like? I mean, being homeschooled, it sounds like you were put in like extracurricular stuff, obviously with like theater and everything. did you try, or were you ever like in a band playing with other kids, or was it mainly something that you kind of did by yourself or with your family?
Well, theater I did for a really long time. I started when I was like 10, and then I auditioned for a school, a vocational school that had a theater program in high school. And so I went to 4 years of this vocational school that was all theater based. So all of our classes were like intensives on acting, writing, dancing, singing,
That's
putting on
cool.
music. So I was really into that. Um, but yeah, sorry, what was your question?
I was just wondering if you were in a band or you had your own songs that you would
That's
like
right. That's
perform
right.
to people or anything
Yeah,
like
like
that.
I was sorry. So I was in theater. I was like becoming more of an individual and like figuring myself out. And this was towards like my senior year in high school. And all of the kids in my class were like getting ready to audition for conservatory programs, like go to college. And
Mm,
I just knew that I wasn't going to be able to afford to go to school. And they were auditioning for these like really premier like conservatory
Juilliard or
programs.
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like,
Clive
Boston
Davis.
Conservatory and yeah,
Yeah.
and Carnegie Mellon and like NYU, Tisch, like really
Yeah.
good schools. And I was just like, I'm not going to be able to go. Like, I know I can't go. My parents had been really like upfront about like, if you want that, you can do that, but you have to do it yourself. You got to figure it out. And so I was just feeling like that it was just not for me. And
Mhm.
I was starting to just like feel like the theater wasn't doing it wasn't like the medium that was like right for me because I had so much that I wanted to express and so many things that I wanted to say. And when you're, doing theater, you're performing a character and you're embodying somebody else and expressing yourself through somebody else. And that just it wasn't like fulfilling that need.
Mhm.
But I learned so much about, stage presence and how to be on stage, how to be comfortable performing. And so it was senior year, and I was just like, I don't think I'm going to go to college. I think I should join a band. And so I found auditions on Craigslist for a band and in New Jersey, and I auditioned, and I just kind of kept doing it. We started playing shows, and I played in bands for years before kind of going out on my own and doing my own thing.
Wow. So once you start or once you join these bands, like obviously you're taking it serious. Like that's what you wanted to do. And how long did these bands last? Like what's kind of like was there a level of success you had achieved at that time? Because I know you eventually moved to Los Angeles, correct?
Yeah, I did. I was playing in these bands, and we would play shows, and like whether it was 5 people or 25 people, there was always a reason to play the next show as
Mhm.
a result of these shows. Like there was always someone there that was like, oh, we want you to play this. And so the shows really, that's kind of what kept me like in the bands and singing and play, making music in these bands. I never released any music that I made with these bands. We never had records that like we put on Bandcamp or anything. We were always just like trying to get out in front of people and play live. I was in a two-piece band for a little bit, and we had played a show, a little acoustic show at South by Southwest, which I don't
Damn, that's a legit gig to get.
know. It's funny though, because like South by Southwest on its face is this like, like cool, like industry thing. But there are so many little showcases that take place. And like we played at, I don't know if it's still this way, this was years ago, but we played at midnight in a cabaret theater. And there was like nobody there. And it's still, it's South by Southwest, but it's this like, I think that the perception of these things is always grander than what they really are. And so we were super excited about the opportunity, and we drove out there in our minivan, and we were like really stoked to play. And I love that we played that, but it wasn't what it sounds like. There wasn't anybody there. It, it wasn't the opportunity we thought we were getting. But there was a guy there who was I can't believe I'm telling you this. This is stuff I like just do not talk about, but what the fuck, why not?
I appreciate it. Thank you.
There was a guy there who was recruited by this company, Restoration Hardware, which is a furniture company.
Oh yeah, I know
And
restaurant, and it's expensive furniture, but
yeah, it's like bougie stuff.
oh yeah,
Like
I live in Nashville, and there's one here that has a like a high end restaurant inside of it.
okay, so what they had
It's,
started to do is they were getting into like lifestyle. They wanted to open hotels, they wanted to open galleries. And this was all very like, I think they had really big dreams. And I don't know really what came of a lot of it. I remember at the time that they were also commissioning fine artists to create art for them and do these gallery showings, but they were like, in affiliation with Restoration Hardware. I want to say they wanted to get into hospitality and do like this restaurant that makes a lot of sense. I think that was in line with what they were trying to do
yeah,
with the
it's
company, but
bizarre. I mean, it's beautiful and the food's
really
good,
weird,
but it's like you're
really weird.
literally in the middle of the store, and then you can kind of go around, and I think you're just sitting on like their products. You're like, oh damn, this is a comfortable couch. You're like, oh yeah, well, you by the way, you can go purchase it over here.
It's like insidious marketing, like on
Yeah.
like it's like the highest level of marketing. It's like experiential marketing. And so what they were doing was like kind of thinking of all facets of that, how to
Mhm.
create an immersive experience, right? And so they went out to find artists and musicians to like sign to like a record label that they made, very similar to like a Red Bull or like
Oh sure.
or like even Starbucks, like Starbucks putting out records, like
Yeah,
remember
Monster,
when
I
they were
think,
doing
did
that?
something similar. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Starbucks would. You'd come in and like they
They'd have
had the
that
record.
exclusive CD. And so I think they were trying to like do something like that. And the guy that they hired to like go find artists, the A&R that they hired, like he was at our random little show. Like I don't even know why, but that was my first experience in like, oh, we want to give you money to make music and then we'll sell that music. And so my bandmate and I were like, okay, like we're not doing anything, like that sounds like a dream. And we were called the Brixtons, and they were like, okay, cool, so here's a bunch of money, go make a record. And we were like, we don't know how to do that, we don't know anybody. And around the same time, we played another show in Brooklyn at this little like street festival. And someone came that ended up being my manager and managing me for what became the next like 7 years of my career,
Wow.
up until just last year. So this guy was in the audience. He's like, I think you're great. I think we can do something. Let's figure something out. And we were like, oh, well, we just got a bunch of money from this furniture company. Like, we can make a record with them. And he's like, this looks really bad, but okay, like, really don't like this contract, but all right, here's some money. Like, I know some people in Nashville. You guys could go make a record in Nashville. And we were sent to Nashville. I stayed for like 2 months to make a record with this producer, Brendan Benson, who is in the band The Raconteurs.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
it's a Jack White band. And
Uh-huh.
he is a record producer. And I guess we sent some demos and he was like, I'll make that record. I think it was a really good paycheck. And,
Yeah.
um, and so we went out, we made the record, and we gave it to Restoration Hardware, the label. We're like, here's our record. And they were like, we don't like this. We don't want this. We want you to make like an acoustic record, like the show that we saw. And we had made this relationship with this producer, and we were like, we don't care about Restoration Hardware. We're like,
Yeah.
we
Get
fuck
us on
with Brendan
Third Man
Benson.
Records.
That's what I'm saying. So that record never came out and nothing ended up happening, and the band broke up, and it was this, it was my first experience in like a heartbreak, in a band setting. And but my manager was like, hey, you made a record, like it's not going to come out, but like what do you want to do? What do you want to do? Like you should make a record. You can be an artist. Like you don't need a band. We could do this. You should, work with me. Let's find some people for you to write with. Like I know a lot of producers, and it kind of just started from there and just like became this artistry thing as a result of that. And I came to LA just to spend a couple of weeks like working with producers, and I just never left because I met producers that I really liked, and I started making a record with someone who became the executive producer of my first album. And I just, it wasn't the plan, but I've lived in LA for 8 years now.
Wow. So
Yeah.
you were still living in Jersey when you went to Nashville to record that record, the first one?
Yeah, I was. Yeah. I
And
was
then
just like living in an apartment, like a little basement, like barely making any money. I was bartending. I was waiting tables. Yeah, I was hustling out on the East Coast, like playing every weekend in New York and just like trying to make something happen. And yeah, it's weird to think about it now because it feels really like I feel so separated from it, like that. There's no way that happened, but that really is how it happened.
that's wild. So because Restoration Hardware paid for the record, they just scrapped it. And they're like,
Yeah,
that
they're just
we're
like,
yeah,
oh
whatever. Yeah,
well.
we'll sell a couch and we'll get the money back.
Exactly, exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but wow. Okay, so then your manager says, "I'll find you some people," and is that in LA or do you form a band? And is that what became this, that your solo project that you're doing now?
Yeah, I mean, he introduced me to some people to make music with, and I just started writing with producers and songwriters. And yeah, the artistry thing, like it really just kind of developed from there. I started playing some shows. I was going, back and forth to the East Coast to like, be with family and play shows and try to make some money here and there. And that's where I played a show after I'd done some writing sessions and put some music together. And a publisher was at the show, and he was at this company, Big Deal,
Mhm.
and he signed me. And that was my first, like professional experience and relationship in the music industry. And from that publishing deal, I had an advance and I was able to quit bartending and, station myself in LA and be like, this is where I live now, and not stay in sublets anymore, but like get an apartment. And yeah, I started making my first record as a result of this publishing deal. And the publisher had paid for the record, and we shopped it to labels after it was made. And so I
Mm,
didn't make that record, even though it came out on Harvest Records, which is a subsidiary of Capitol.
yeah,
It was made entirely outside of their system, and they bought it
they
from
just
my
bought the record. Yeah,
yeah.
and you had you had a pretty viral song from that situation too,
It
or is
was
that
my first
later?
song. Yeah, it was my first song, my first single that I put out. It was so weird now because I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure this is accurate, but I think it was Spotify's first year,
Oh
or at
wow.
least its first year, like being like branded the way that it was, like this is for users.
Hmm.
I think its usership was like not even a fraction of what it is today, and it just wasn't the
Yeah, it's
like,
like the gold standard now, right? I mean,
right.
it's I have this many monthly listeners on Spotify. Like no one gives a shit if like no one's dropping like, oh, Apple Play Music, I
Yeah,
do this or whatever, or Google
it's the
Music.
metric used. It's like our metric system now for, and yeah, it's such a, it's so synonymous with music industry
Right.
now. At the time, it like really wasn't. It was new. It was this new function, right?
Mhm.
And I put out my first song in its first year. And so viral then, it just doesn't mean the same thing that it does now. So I think it got like a million streams. And
I mean, that's still, if you think about that, I mean, that's amazing. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
it was cool. Yeah.
and with not even that many active users as there are now, the
Yeah.
pool is a lot smaller and a million people still play it. Like,
Yeah. It was a way to identify that what we were doing was like something to
yeah,
keep at, right?
validation for sure.
Yeah, it felt like, okay, yeah, keep doing this. And initially I was really like hesitant to be an artist and to like not be in a band. And I was thinking like I'm a Capricorn. I'm pragmatic, like to a fault. It gets in my way all the time. But at the time I was like, no, I think I just want to be a songwriter because you can actually make money as a songwriter. And I'm never gonna make it as, an artist. Like I'm not gonna make it. And so I should just focus on songwriting. And I was putting out the music, hoping that that would help me get into rooms with writers and producers and artists so that I could be a writer, which is funny because
Oh,
finding that I'm coming back to that now at this stage in my life. But the artistry was really like, it started as a means to get there. And
to
it just
meet
kind
people
of,
to eventually say, okay, well, I want to be a songwriter, so I'll try to write for whoever it may be.
yeah, it was almost like if I can get some of my own clout going, that's how I'll get in the room with the artist that I want to write for.
Yeah, not a bad
And
idea.
yeah, I thought, this might work. And
Yeah.
I really felt like the artistry thing was not going to work out for me. Like I just didn't see it. I think I tell myself the most realistic version of the story at all times so that I don't lose myself in um just wishing I was something different or that my circumstances were different. It's almost like anything good that happens just gets to be a good thing that happened, and rather than like falling short of some expectation. And that's been really hard to maintain as I got into artistry. And I think I knew that it was going to get harder to maintain that frame of mind as I continued in a career as an
Yeah.
artist.
I mean,
And
that's a
it's
great
certainly
mindset.
has.
I was
It's
gonna say, for me, I'm the type of person that would be like, oh, I hope I get this or get this many, whatever downloads on my podcast, and then I'll get it, and then I'm like upset that the next one doesn't. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, yeah.
like I set too far of an expectation instead of like living in the moment. Like
Well, I
instead of being like,
definitely,
this is great, I did this. It's like, yeah, that's cool. Like, well, well, how come I'm not here now? Like, I don't
I
know.
mean,
It's
I've
my
heard it
own
described as like
character
the,
default.
I think that's everybody, to be honest. Like, I really do. And you hear about like people in such positions of power, influence, they're really successful and they have that same narrative of like, oh, but like if I just get there, then that's when I'll feel like I really achieved what like I don't think anyone gets to feel that sense of like, I did it, I got there, because I think there is a construct and it's not real and it just doesn't exist. So you can't ever actually arrive there because it's
Yeah,
made up. So
yeah, it's
yeah,
fascinating to think. Like,
it is.
the Anthony, I interviewed this guy Anthony from the band Bayside, and he was telling me the two things that really stuck out to the conversation was one, when they got signed, he was like, he thought it was like, oh, you get signed and that's it. It was like, basically, he's like, you just went from like the kids table at Thanksgiving, and now you're at the adult table, and now what do you got? And then he also said, you never arrive, like what you just said, like you
Yeah,
will
no,
never
that's,
arrive.
I think it's
I'm like,
universally felt. And if you can just be like, oh, cool, so there is no arrival. So what do I do with that? But then I think we're in a field that there are metrics and there are numbers assigned to, the things that you do creatively
and
and trying to,
success too.
absolutely. And like success is frankly measured in this industry. It is measured. And so you have to find a way to like remain in that like holistic mindset while also just being okay with the reality that there are these metric systems set up to define how well you're doing.
Mhm.
And like that is just what it is. And you just do your best to like hold those two truths to the same weight in your mind at the same time. I know that that's like a Buddhist practice. It's supposed to be like true enlightenment and true wisdom is when you can hold two oppositional truths to the same weight at the same time, is like when you've truly found like peace. And it's
Yeah.
something I work on consistently, is to just remain in balance and to both accept that there are numbers and metrics and you will be judged and you will be critiqued, and that is the nature of what you're doing. And also none of these things really matter. None of these things are definitive to who you are, and what you have to offer and what your value is not actually defined by these things. So they feel oppositional, but if you can just like accept them both at the same time, maybe then you can like relax a little bit and just try to like be present in it and enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah, I love that idea. It's yeah, it's just such a like you said, it's a subjective field, but there's metrics now in real time that tell you whether or not the subjective aspect of it people care about, I guess,
And
is
it will
is what
affect your bottom line also, which has obviously a real effect on your real life. So like things like those numbers, if they're higher, they will lead to different opportunities and like a different number in your bank account. So,
right.
right, like, and it is going to affect the way that you're perceived.
Mhm.
And I think that's why I've always really cared that every move I make creatively is really authentic, because if something good is going to happen, if it happens because of something I did that wasn't authentic to me, I feel like that would follow me the rest of my life. So I think I do that at the dismay of record companies and people who have tried to figure out how to market it and how to make it commercially successful. And I really care that it is just genuine, that what I'm saying and what I'm doing in my art is authentic, and whether that is going to lead to like ultimate success has to be secondary to the thing itself being meaningful to me.
Mhm.
And yeah, I that's too, it helps me kind of redefine what success means. And I do think that we get to make our own conclusions about what success is. And it doesn't have to be the same as success to somebody else. And success to me is that I get to make music. I have the resources that I need to make music, and that music gets to be the center of my life all the time. That's what makes me feel successful in what I do. And I try to just let the numbers do what they're going to do. You just hope for the best, right?
Yeah, 100%. That's a great outlook on it all. I mean, you are 100% authentic in what you do. I mean, listening to your songs and like how vulnerable you are with your lyrics and your music videos, and it's like a lot of people wouldn't have the courage to do what you do. And also on that, like I feel like the people that are the most authentic now are the ones that are like bubbling through, especially with things like TikTok. Like if you try to just jump on a trend that's already happening or write a song similar to something that's already going, it's very rare that the next one will hit in the same, in the same way.
Totally. I feel like with all of that stuff, like if I were to ever give advice to anyone that's like
I'm gonna
doing
ask you that at the end of the interview, but
oh
I'd love to hear.
yeah, perfect, perfect. I love that. What's your advice question? Because I'm always like, I don't know, to be honest. Like the truth is that like I'm figuring it out, and giving advice when you're in the midst of something is like it can feel really silly. You're like, I'm not, please don't ask me. I don't know anything. Like I'm a baby that's just trying to like feel my way through this. But I would say that like the only way to like actually win and is to do it as yourself. And
Mhm.
like anything else is just like not going to fulfill you. So if you're doing something because it's a trend, or because you think it might help you with views or engagement or virality, like approaching it from that perspective, it just takes the authenticity away, and what you're left with is something pretty empty. And it will ultimately, it's not going to make you happy, and it doesn't matter how big it gets, and you'll find yourself chasing that forever. And I know of a lot of people who get viral success and then find themselves just kind of chasing their tail, trying to figure out how to do that over and over and over again. And the nature of it is that it happens once, right? Like that
Yeah.
is kind of how that mechanism is designed. And it's also designed to keep you trying to play that lottery machine over and over and over and hope for the same result. And really ultimately all these things are trying to do is keep you on your phone, on the screen. That is,
Yep.
they're not created for any other purpose. And I think if we can just like find a way to like live with that and not be swallowed up by it and not be consumed by it and not let it be the dictator of all of our choices and all of the way that we spend our time, the way that we make our decisions, I think we'll ultimately be in a much better place. And I'm really interested to see how all of that shakes out as things continue to develop and these things become more a part of our like everyday lives in a way that it's not going to be the new shiny toy anymore. And I'm
Uh-uh.
really curious what that's going to mean for the future of how artists share what they make and connect with audiences. And ultimately, I'd say anything you put up anywhere, just like be real about it and do it because you really want to and you really believe in it so that you don't come to have that kind of experience where something happens because for reasons that are really devoid of
Right.
meaning.
And what if you do something, based off of a trend and then it lands and then now you're known as that person and it's like, how do you like, are you really willing to set up the rest of your life doing that that thing? I mean, I don't it's just so crazy to think. And then like just how you're saying, like, what is this gonna look like in 5 years from now? You
Right,
know?
right. I think I really try to look at it like too, like I try to see the positivity in being niche and being small, and I try to see like how that actually benefits my artistry.
Mhm.
And I think there's because of how much access we have now and how the landscape of like how you share and then how you also like absorb things and the amount of access to media that we have now, it's so different than ever before, especially like when I started it wasn't like this. People didn't There wasn't
Mhm.
a cultural norm to like check your phone 400 times a day. Like that just was
Yeah.
not how people operated. And so it's been really interesting to like watch the whole thing kind of change as I change and as I continue to put out music, and the landscape of artistry before me, like just there's like a whole city that's sprouted like over these last few years. It's really interesting for me to watch, but I'm trying to see that there is a value in a smaller system. Like when I was on the label, everything is about fan acquisition. Like everything is about gaining, growing. And I think my shift in focus now in looking at where everything is at, where I am at, and entering into this independent venture, it's been really cool to make different decisions about how I go about my career and care more about servicing the people that are there, that are loyal, that have shown that they care, turning passive listeners into more hardcore fans and bringing them into your fan base in a deeper way, and really using like a model that isn't all about growth and acquisition and is more about, which feels so corporate and it feels so capitalist and doesn't really intersect like in a meaningful way to me with art. And ultimately, if what I want to sell is authentic art, I'm totally cool with it feeling smaller, looking smaller. And I almost think that there's going to be a value placed on things that are more mysterious, harder to reach, harder to find, have a smaller audience, smaller engagement, that there's got to be a way for that to feel valuable to the industry. Because what I'm finding in real time is that it is valuable, because even though it's not a viral moment, it still has active listeners, people who are sharing it authentically, people who then buy the ticket to the show. Like that is still an experience that's really taking place regardless of virality being present or not. And that's something that I think should really be looked at by the industry as valuable. And I'm excited to see how the pendulum swings now that it's gone so far in this
Yeah.
direction.
It is fascinating because I mean, I'm 38, so when I was growing up, it was like Green Day was they sold out when they signed to a major label and they put out Dookie, and it was like, oh, that was the worst thing you could possibly be, was have a massive fan base. To have that, to achieve that was such a thing. And there's hundreds of millions of people calling them a sellout band,
Right.
but they're all because everyone had their own little scene in their own area. And it was like I would see bands like I grew up with when like, all these emo bands that are now like headlining these Vegas festivals were playing to 25 people. And then when they made to the next level, I was almost like irritated about it. I'm like, what?
Or
Now they're charging $20 and playing to 1,500 people, which instead of being like, that's awesome that they're doing that, it was like, now it's not mine anymore. And
right.
I
Yeah,
feel
there's
like
something special
that's,
about.
yeah, I feel like I like exactly what you're saying. I think there's something so important in that. And instead of being like, I'm gonna sell the whatever, I'm gonna have 1 million TikTok reposts or whatever. It's like, okay, but there's a lot of artists out there that may not have that, but they've been a band for 15 years, and then they can sell 2,000 tickets in every market, and they're
Totally.
doing much better than a band that had one moment of success.
Yeah, I think that's really important to like remember. And I think that sometimes this is stuff that like isn't like sexy to talk about to fans. Like these
Right.
topics, like, there's like a lot of mystery in the industry. And I think that's by design. It's so much about like just the optics are so important. And what's so important is that you look like you've got your shit together at every step of the way, that you look confident and in what is going on around you, so that what you're selling to people is, the ideal, when really like it's fraught with like mistakes and error and like complication and challenges and like failures, lots and lots of failures. And this is stuff that like we're just told not to talk about because it's not hot to the fan, and I completely also understand wanting to protect the fan from the politics of the industry, because this ultimately is for them, and
Mhm.
you want them to have these experiences that can transport them out of the bullshit of their own lives and into a world that is special and different and safe and exciting and magical. And that's kind of like the mystique of artistry, is like a part of it is creating that for people, and so that the environment they're coming into when they're listening to your records or when they're interacting with you on social media or coming to your shows, that they feel like it's a transportation from the mundane and from, what they deal with in their lives. But I
Mhm.
think it's it's important to give people information and to let them have information and do with that information what they will. And I think we're finding just a cultural shift of people just talking about like, hey, like, I mean, I don't know if you read that like Lord expose about like, hey, I'm breaking even on my tour. Like this is
No,
not,
I didn't see that.
just really interesting to see artists of all sizes, someone of her size and her power, to still be struggling to like earn money on a tour. It really speaks to like the reality of that we're living in. And I think people deserve reality and deserve to like hear how things really are. And then they get to react genuinely to what that is. And I think sorry, you hear that leaf blower, guys?
Yeah, it's cool.
Is that
Whatever.
okay? Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm
The
like,
beauty, that's what one thing I do love about doing I mean, did radio. I don't know if it said, but I was on the radio for a long time, like
you have a
17 years.
radio voice, yeah.
Oh, thank you. And it was like it got to the point of being so we would never have a conversation like this. It was always like the most, 5 minutes, snip down to one. What's your favorite burrito in San Diego? No one gives a shit like
Yeah,
that. So I love having these. And I love hearing the struggle of the artist, because it's like if you want to be an artist, that's like legit how it happens. It's not, you don't
right,
just wake up one day and you just sit on the piano and write, let it be. And you're like, oh, well, now I'm going to be a millionaire. It's like that.
right,
None of
right.
that happened.
Yeah, I mean,
So,
it's full of suffering. And I think that's why too, like, it has to be so important to you. Like, you better love this so much for the right reasons to be able to sustain. And I found too, like, I thought it was interesting that you mentioned, like living in Nashville, you have so much access to people who are like really secretly really successful.
mhm,
And a lot of what I found is like the people who are most successful that do this in a way that approach it in a way that's really authentic, like they just stuck around and they just kept doing it. Like they just didn't stop. And
mhm,
that's kind of that's spoken to me in a really major way, because I'm 32, and to be a woman making pop music, like you kind of age out at 17 and people stop giving a shit, and I'm feeling
Which
that.
is so asinine.
It's
But
wild. Yeah, it's really wild. I feel like more, if there's any time to listen to what I have to say, it would be now and not not when I
right,
was
when
stupid.
when you've lived a life, you know
Yes,
what I mean?
exactly. But
Not that 32 is old by any means, but
it's weird though, because adhere to the reality of like your life, and we all kind of have our own little reality going on, and in the rest of the world, like, of course it's not old, and then in the music world it's like, oh, you're like up there. Like, you're
yeah.
old. It's weird. It's
Yeah. We need to get together a best of here. We'll do like a
more
reunion
like
tour. It's
dealing
like
a lot
what?
with like, oh, you haven't popped off yet. Like, it's, you might have you probably missed it, and that's more what it feels like, and
Sure.
sounds like. And I've faced that a lot. And I think, yeah, I'm finding there's so much more value in what I have to say and what my output is now than there ever was before. And so, yeah, I'm definitely, I'm excited to be approaching it in a different way and not be a part of that kind of like corporate world of music in the same way that I was through my whole career to this point. And I came I I came up against so much resistance because I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I didn't want to do what they thought would sell and what they wanted me to do. And I get to now just kind of not care and approach it differently. But yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think fans deserve to know if they want to know, and if they're seeking out information. Like, if you're going to read an interview or listen to an interview, like, I would I would think that you're interested in hearing what they really have to say, right? And in that case, this is the perfect setting for just being really upfront about, this is what it really is. And it's it's not like as magical as it appears. And there's such a great deal of struggle to get from, point A to point B. And I think the more you let fans into that, then the stronger your support system can become. And I found that in my own
Yeah. And the
career since
more
going.
relatable you are as well. It's not like,
Totally.
oh, this person just woke up and they became, what they are. But no, there's so much work entailed behind it. But I want to talk to you about your album that we haven't even touched on yet. But we've talked quite a bit about, the fact now that you are an independent artist and you can make your own decisions. And I'm sure that was pretty, freeing to maybe get out of a situation like that. But I'm curious, like, yeah, you have this record, you put a record out, was it 2022? And then you left the label?
I put out an EP with the label.
Oh yeah,
And
20, yeah, EP with the label. And
yeah,
then now
yeah.
you're independent. So
Yeah.
obviously that chapter, talk to me about like from leaving the label and then to now, like, was that a terrifying, thing for you? Like, what was your thought process like? Or did you know you're going to keep releasing songs and you could care less what, the industry so and so or thought at that point? Or
I think that it wasn't a surprise, firstly, to be dropped at all.
so many
My
bands have
label,
dropped all the time.
totally. And there's always some reason that's bigger than you. And there's also all the reasons that have to do directly with you. And there was all of that, so
Mhm.
excuse me. Um, yeah, my label had dissolved. There was no one working at the label anymore at the time that they dropped me. Like, there was no one with an email address for the label anymore. Like, it had basically ceased to exist, and I was the only person left. And so I knew that, I knew it was over.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, like, as it goes, this is super, super common. So I don't feel like it's I don't feel like it's malicious at all from the point of the standpoint of the company, but they wait until your option period is over. And so, like, I'm sure that you know this, but how it works is, you're given an advance, and to live off of from the record company. And then you're also given, you know, a budget to make your thing.
Mhm.
And then you make the thing, and that begins the cycle. Then the cycle is, you know, the creation of and the promotion of the album, this thing that you made. And the label waited until the option period was ending, was over. And so what that means is like the budget had been spent and the advance had been spent on my living expenses, on my rent for that year, and you know, to feed myself and to like drive my car. So it wasn't a lot to begin with, but it's what I was living off of. And
Right.
so right, that's like how I didn't have to, you know, work another job. That's what kept me, you know, making records only.
Mhm.
And touring. I was touring a lot. And yeah, so when the pandemic happened and my touring business fell apart because I couldn't tour, all of those resources had dried up, and I was just living off of this advance for a couple of years. This went on, right? I mean, we all remember. So the money had run out and the option period was over, and it was like, you're either going to sign me and give me, you know, another advance to live on and another budget to make another record, or you're going to drop me. And because they dropped me, the budget didn't come and the advance didn't come. And so I was in a position where like, I mean, I just straight up, I was in a really, really bad spot. Like my
Yeah, what do
lease,
you do at that point?
what
I
do
mean,
you
you have
do?
yeah,
Yeah.
you have no income now. They just pulled that right away from you without any notice.
And, you know, obviously they own the masters. I'm in a recoupment process. So like
Oh,
I don't see
Jesus.
any money from,
Yeah.
you
So
know,
if it
the
gets a
music.
bazillion streams, it doesn't even matter to you.
Exactly, right. And so that had a pretty profound effect too on like trying to market it and promote it myself, because I was like, this doesn't even belong to me. And that really grew this thing in my experience with it, where I felt a real separation between myself and my records by the time they came out. And it was really hard for me to keep up with promoting them. But yeah, so my lease was ending at the same time and there was no money coming in and I had just no prospects. Like this was my life I was signed there for 6 years. So, you know, you get used to the way that, you know, what that life provides you. And then everything ended. Everything was gone. Like in an instant. Like I couldn't re-sign my lease because I didn't have any income, and I couldn't move somewhere else because I didn't have any income. And it was either like go and live with your parents and in New Jersey and try to figure something out, or stay in LA in your car until something happens. And so I lived in my car for some time and I just really, really struggled. Like I, of course, was at a point where I'm like, it's not even an emotional decision. It's like, can I feasibly continue to make music? It was Everything was pointing to no, because I didn't have any resources to home or feed myself. And the only thing that I did have at that time was, you know, the body of work that I had put out to that point, and the fans that had come along as a result of me putting out music and touring and playing these shows and building a fan base for a few years. So looking at what I had in front of me, I was like, I've got fans that really care about me, and I have this like undying need to create things. And so I leaned on my fans and I played a couple of shows to make a little bit of money, and that got me into an apartment. And then I started like pitching the songs that I was working on at that time. I think too, I don't know that fans really understand that like when you're making records, you don't necessarily have to like put like a deposit down on like a studio and like lock yourself in a studio. There's people who like make music in their bedrooms, and they do it in their garages, and they do it in spaces that they rent together with a bunch of friends. And that's how I was making records through that process of like not having a place to live and not making
Oh,
any
wow.
money. So those songs ended up being the songs on this album. And I was
Were
finding
recorded just kind of all over the place.
all over the place. And it was the first time I had done that. My other records had executive producers, and you know, you get all your demos together and you get in a room for a couple of months and you spend every day in that studio making that record. And this was, I didn't even know that I could make an album because there was nothing, you know, there was nothing going on. I also was really having a really hard time getting anyone interested in bringing me on. I think that fans also have you know, just a lack of the information to know that like having music out, it's not an asset. It's actually a detriment unless it's been like super successful. So if you've put out a record that costs $100,000 to make and it only sells $50,000 worth of, right? Like if that's what you recoup,
Mhm.
that's not a successful record. That's a failed record. Whereas if I were doing that now as an independent and I sold, you know, and I sold my record and made 50 grand, I'd be like, that's
That's
awesome.
amazing,
That's
right?
really great. But that's just not, that wasn't the structure that I was in. And so I had two failed records
Well,
that
that's
just
a lot of artists are put in that
right,
position. It's like, okay, we're gonna front 100 grand for everything to do with this record, and then if you sell $50,000, now you owe them $50,000, right?
right, exactly. And
So they're a bank.
doesn't it doesn't register as
Yeah,
this is a successful thing that you should
right.
get involved with. So it doesn't add to your resume as like, cool, this is like a resume builder. It actually, you go into these meetings with different companies and this stuff is detrimental to your pitch. Like they look at all of that stuff. They analyze your, like everything is algorithmic now. And so
Mhm.
they just run your shit through a computer system and they're like, yes or no,
Yeah,
is this gonna make us money or won't it? And my project, it doesn't make people money, or it hasn't historically. And so I was just like, no one wanted it. Like no one wanted it. I also knew that I didn't want to go to a label. And so I was pitching to all these distribution companies and like indie labels and just like partners that would be like different than what I was doing at Capitol. And yeah, it was not hitting. But I knew the records were meaningful. I knew the records were important. And I knew that they were special for me, like some of my most special music that I had made to this point. And I was writing about all this shit that was like, okay, this is, things can get really, really dark. And I'm in a really dark place. How do I find the light anyway? And like, how do I transcend this? And how do I need to push through this. Like I have to, and I have to find myself on the other side. So let me not focus anymore on these like what I have, you know, like what are my earthly possessions that I own, you know, and like what's my situation? What does my life look like around me? I really just had to be like, fuck all that, go inward, like ask yourself deeper, more meaningful questions about who you really are when all of this stuff is taken away, and like look upward and like think about how you're just cells and you're just this being on this fucking planet that's a part of this enormous thing, and nothing that you're doing is that serious. And it really, that's what all of the music started to be about at that time. And yeah, I mean, it's just so sorry.
no.
Um, yeah, it stop. Yeah, I just like writing the record and writing records like that completely pulled me out of that place that I was in. And while everything around me looked really shit and really bleak, I still was able to like keep trying. And I think that was only because I was so focused on these themes that made their way into this record. And I think that's why this record is so important for me to be putting out now, because I'm finding myself, you know, a year from the time that I was dropped, like I'm, you know, I'm not like killing it. Like I live in a studio apartment, you know, like I struggle. My car is being held together with duct tape. But like I'm so happy and like I'm so grateful and like I get to do this and it feels amazing that things can get that bad and you could still fight your way through it and be okay. And now I have this record coming out that's like all about that. So I'm really excited about it. I'm really like, I'm interested to see what happens. But ultimately, if the only thing this album did is help just pull me out of that place that I was in when I was dropped, like, yeah, I mean, it was emotional for so many reasons, but mostly because I felt like I didn't know who I was when I took all that stuff away. And I got to figure out what's really important to me and who I really am without the validation and without the perception and without the material things. And yeah, so that's definitely very much what this album is about. And it like it totally saved me making the album. It really did.
Yeah, that I love your honesty, and like it really sometimes takes getting to that point. You know what I mean? Like getting to there, like that low or the bottom, and then being able to now you're back on your feet. You have an amazing record out. You're, you know, you have an apartment. You're doing these things, but and you're doing what you love, and you're able to survive on music. And
Yeah.
it's all gonna just keep building and building up again from here. And you're independent, so you don't have to worry about somebody else owning all the masters.
If something, I mean, if I were to do the same exact thing with this record as my last records did, I can finally now like that will benefit me directly. And I've
Mhm.
never had that before. And so it's not this like constant race on a treadmill to nowhere. It's like this is actually just meaningful steps forward. And it's something that I can actually like expand upon and grow with. And I'm so, so grateful that I had the experience that I did. I'm really grateful for everyone that worked really hard for me on the label side and really tried to make that environment work for me. I think it's become so obvious that that is just not the environment to thrive in for artists like me, um, who are not willing to be performers first and care, you know, more deeply about what it is that they are saying and not as interested in commodifying what they do and more interested in creating something real. And yeah, I think that this independent space is set up for people like me to be able to start thriving in the music industry rather than struggling to just to keep up and in a way that doesn't really feel right at the end of the day.
Well, it's the record that Rebels, the album, and it's
Yeah.
June it comes out?
June 16, yeah.
Are you doing, like because I wanna buy the album, is it coming on like a vinyl, or are you just doing streaming, or
I couldn't afford it this time
yeah,
around,
it's
so
expensive. That's why I was
it is.
curious.
It is. I this is like as DIY and bare as it comes. Like I I'm even finding, you know, like I'm going to tour it and I'm excited to tour
You
it, but
are? Okay, that was my next
I
question.
I will, but you know, it's going to be difficult for me to try to explain to fans that it can't happen this year because I don't know if, you know, I'm sure that you talk to other artists about what that space looks like now post
Oh, it's
pandemic and
ridiculous.
it's
Yeah.
just gotten it's just a whole other game out there. So like rather than waiting, you know, I also think I think this I hope that people aren't bored by what we're talking about, you know, because I know fans just kind of want to hear about the fun stuff. But
Well, I started this podcast so songwriters can be inspired to do this,
good,
and that's
good.
why
Well,
I love
hopefully this
that.
is inspiring and not like
Well, it's
deflating
the
or
it's real. It's
yeah,
real, and this
yeah.
you aren't the first person that's came on here and had a tough time. You know what I
Okay,
mean?
good, good. Yeah, because it is a really cool thing to do, and there are ways to do it. And I hope that I can help someone understand that you don't have to do it in the way that maybe has been like um most broadly accepted as like this is how you do this. So I'm
Right.
interested in talking about the other ways to go about it. But there used to be, you know, a queue for to play a show for a certain venue, you know, you would submit your name, you say, I want these dates, and there'd be a queue, you know, like a line of other artists waiting for that date too. And you're maybe like, maybe you're the fifth artist that's asked for those dates. And so you got a pretty good chance other stuff is going to drop off, and you're probably going to get those dates. You might get those dates, or you might have to wait a couple months, whatever. The queues are now like 25 plus artists deep. And so you're not waiting for, you know, 3 months down the line from now, you're waiting for 9 months down the line
Right.
from. So in terms of being able to plan a tour, especially for an album that comes out this spring, I won't be able to tour it until 2024, like early 2024. So that's the plan, and I'm excited to do it. But the reality is that we're just in a completely different world now, and it's just not the same that it used to be in terms of like how you market and roll out your record. So I would love to be putting this out physically. I just didn't have the resources, but excuse me, sorry.
Yeah.
I I'm a physical person. Like I like tangible. I like to hold stuff and like feel
So do
stuff.
I.
You know, like maybe it's our generation or whatever, but it's harder for me to just reckon with like everything is digital now. But
Mhm.
I'm just proud to be like doing what I can, you know, and like
Right.
still functioning.
Right. And I was gonna say, I mean, aspiring songwriters out there, you are doing music as your job full time. I mean, imagine that. Like, if somebody told me, like, you know, you don't have to work 5 other jobs. You know what I mean? It's like you do music, and how many people would be stoked on that aspect is like, you wouldn't even know. I mean, wait, I can just do music and sure, you know, and live life. Like, how crazy is that? Like, I mean, that's such a victory.
There's like all kinds of cool ways to like only do music as a career, and it doesn't all have to do with like, this comes back to what we were initially talking about, but it really doesn't, it doesn't all hinge on whether people know who you are. Like
Right.
you really can, like I sang demos for a long time for other writers, like, and I would, you know, get paid to like sing, you know, a bunch of guys would write a song to pitch to pop girls, and they would need, you know, a
A
female pop
female.
vocalist, and
Mhm.
I would come in for a couple hours and I had my demo fee and I would sing the song, and no one knew that I did that. And I like, no one has to know that I did that. It's that was a way to make a little bit of money, so that, and also to meet producers and writers and artists. So like I would be in the room introducing myself as the demo singer, but you strike up a conversation and you start a rapport with someone and you're like, hey, I make music too, I would love to work with you. And then you've got a relationship. So there are like, there's so many ways to go about this. And actually very few of them have to do with like, how do I get as big as possible and as seen as possible? Because there's so few slots that are open for people like that. And I would say like it's would be more beneficial for someone going after this to look at all of the tiny doors that you can open for yourself, that might lead somewhere really cool. And I've met a lot of really cool people by just like networking in ways that you just wouldn't necessarily expect. It's not all about putting yourself online and trying to get your songs heard on TikTok. Like there's so many other ways that you can make meaningful connections in the music industry. And one thing always leads to another if you're diligent and you're a hard worker and you show up and you give your best. And if you, you know, if you really care, like that will come through. And there's all kinds of stuff that you can do. So, yeah, I think songwriting is like still so alive and well. And I hope that there's still people going for it, you know, knowing how hard it is out here and just thinking about it in a more holistic way than, you know, I've got to make it and I've got to make it online and I've got to go viral. I got to be big. And yeah, so many other unique and inspiring ways to be heard and to be involved.
I love that. You kind of, I was going to ask you for my last question if you have any advice for aspiring artists, but that was pretty much dead on beautiful advice to give somebody. Um, So I'm gonna ask you a different question, and I
Okay.
want to know if, is there something that you've learned, kind of along the way that maybe you wish you would have known, maybe years beforehand, or when you moved to LA? Is there something that you've learned in that time period? Like, I really wish I would have known that, blah. And I'm sure there's a million things, but I
There's
didn't
so
know if
many
if
things.
there's something off the top of your head that you'd be like,
Um,
I wish I could tell myself that this is gonna, to do this instead.
I think I would say that your intuition is almost always right. And a lot of people are going to tell you to not trust your gut. And if you're told to do something or given advice that does not feel right to you, it is not right for you. And like you're allowed to say no. So, like, I think we're really, when you're trying to get out here and just have opportunities and put yourself, in the right place at the right time. And we're all like, it is such a challenge. And when you're given a spot or given like a bit of light, you want to just do anything that you can, right? Just like show up and just, I'll do anything. And there were times that I knew something was not the right move for me. And I would do it anyway and agree to it because I thought they'll just give that to somebody else, or I'm going to piss them off and they're not going to work with me anymore. Or, if I'm wrong and this fails, then it's all on me. And I would say like, that's more empowering than you think. And you're allowed to say no, and you're allowed to allow things like to not be for you, and the right things will not pass you. Like what's meant for you is there. And I think I was never encouraged that my intuition is worth listening to. And I would just say like, follow that, like really listen to it, because it's almost never wrong. Like it is such a meaningful thing to lean on, because there's no right way to do this, but there's a right way for you. So, and you know what that is better than anybody can dictate to you or for you.
Bringing it backward.